I was just saying, Greg, obviously, in addition to being the co-host of the 5/8, is the author of the newsletter Prevail, and your column your newsletter this weekend was fantastic, because as we talk about what's happening in California, what's happening in Los Angeles, this display of military might by Trump, it has raised the specter of what it means to have U.S. military brought into a position to point their weapons at American citizens. And so we and Lisa, I think this is the perfect intersection, because we need to talk about the history of it, and we need to talk about what the law tells us right now, and then what we think will happen with an administration that does not care about history or the law. So, Greg, why don't you set the table? Because
Okay.
if anyone hasn't read it, and I know they're going to drop a link in the chat, but if you haven't read it, bookmark it, read it as soon as this episode is over, because it is chock full. There's something for everyone, including Hamilton fans who've been enjoying the resurgence of Aaron Burr songs, because you bring some pretty cool stuff to the surface here.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I was, we know about posse comitatus, which sounds like something somebody made up, but is apparently a real thing. Lisa will get to that, but that just means that the military can't do law enforcement basically on U.S. soil. They're not allowed to do that. And the only way that can be suspended is when they invoke the Insurrection Act. And I thought, okay, well, how did the Insurrection Act of 1807 start? Like, what was the context around the formation of the Insurrection Act of 1807? And it turns out that Aaron Burr is responsible, because I did not realize that he was the sitting vice president when he killed Hamilton, by the way, in the duel. I thought it was after. Like, can you imagine if that happened now? It would be like the vice president shooting his friend in the face on a hunting trip or something. It would be, oh, wait, never mind. I guess it isn't that crazy after all. So he Burr, like that happens. Nobody indicts him. Everything goes away. He goes to South Carolina. He goes back to DC and just finishes out his term like everything's fine. Oh yeah, Hamilton was, we don't need him around anyway. But then when his term is over, he doesn't run for reelection. Jefferson doesn't want him, so he wanders off into the West. And at this time in the history of the United States, the Louisiana Purchase has just happened. So we have all this land that people live there, but Americans don't live there yet. We haven't conquered it yet, and there's a lot of space and opportunity, and there's a lot of states that we now know that have not formed yet and didn't exist, and that was called the Old Southwest Territory. So Burr goes into the Old Southwest Territory and hooks up with this plantation owner dude whose name is, I forget, some crazy name. It's in the piece, and it sounds like a Dr. Seuss name, and the guy Wilkinson, who's the a commander in the U.S. Army and the governor of Louisiana. And the three of them together allegedly are conspiring to start and establish their own country somewhere in this territory, actually where northern Louisiana and southern Arkansas collide. So the center of the universe, right? Haha. But that the plan sort of falls apart eventually, and nothing happens, and he winds up getting indicted and acquitted for treason. But the Insurrection Act went into being on the last day of the Ninth Congress, because they thought this guy was going to have his own country, a rival country, right across the Mississippi. And to make it worse, slavery would be illegal there, so the slaves could just go there. And then what would the South do? It would be catastrophic. We can't have that. So Jefferson, they do the thing and they pass this act. Because again, it's a sitting vice president or an ex-vice president, an army commander, and a guy with, basically an oligarch of the time, and open land that they could control. Now, if you contrast that with like 50 people in a Home Depot parking lot, I'm just saying it's not remotely the same thing. It's not the same thing at all. And the fact that it took this much preamble to even explain it, makes it pretty clear that it's not the same thing. So for Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act because of nothing happening in LA that doesn't, normally happen in us. So it's just madness. There is no historical precedent for something that's ridiculous. Even when Jefferson used it in 2008, some traders up in Lake Champlain didn't want to pay the tariff. Got to pay the tariff. At least they were breaking the law. These people are in Los Angeles are not breaking the law. You're allowed to be in a Home Depot parking lot. You're allowed to wave a sign up that says "fuck ICE" or whatever. I don't know. So that's the background. But Lisa, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. This is the way it's being invoked. This insurrection notion in this instance is so counter-historical, so ridiculous. And, I don't know when troops have ever been sent in to deal with dancing protests. It's quite extraordinary what we're seeing unfold. Of course, Trump is itching for this dispute to try to escalate and rationalize his extremism. But, the irony just doesn't even come close to being the right description. Like, you have the president that unleashed an insurrection on the United States, who basically attempted a coup to overturn the 2020 election, who called the people who attacked the Capitol Police with weapons, including flagpoles and, other
Zip ties.
cool, yeah, zip tie, that they were heroes. Calling, people who were actually engaged in insurrection, who he pardoned, hundreds of people he pardoned who had been convicted, either based on their plea agreements or based on trials, which they lost, to pardon them as one of his very first acts as president, and then to dare to assert that, a protest in Los Angeles is somehow an insurrection warranting moving troops off a Navy ship, calling in the Marines, ordering the National Guard to intervene. Overkill doesn't begin to describe it. It's outrageous and offensive to the notion of law and justice. It's really an outrageous act. And it's also the case that it turns out, like, this whole Trump experiment of awfulness over these past several years has just revealed the numerous weaknesses in our law. One of my friends has described the Constitution and some of these laws as someone driving a horse and buggy on I-95. Like, we have these laws that were written with, feathers, with ink in a feather inkwell for the Insurrection Act, that now are somehow supposed to protect us from this lawless man.